Your recent industry benchmarking highlights what you call procurement paralysis.
We're going to see a cost increase after all the pushes and pulls between CARB and EPA of about $12,000 to $15,000 per asset. Demand is still fairly low on the for hire side, yet we have this big cost increase coming. And how are we going to navigate it?
Welcome to the Heavy Duty Parts Report. My name is Jamie Irvin. In this episode, we're talking about a challenge many fleets are facing right now. And I'm going to read it to you so that I get this correct. Procurement paralysis driven by uncertainty, rising costs, and rapid change in equipment strategy. That's what we're going to talk about today. To help me with that, I have Brian, Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations at Fleet Advantage. Brian, welcome to the Heavy Duty Parts Report. So happy to have you here.
Great. Thanks for having me.
In the intro, I pulled a quote from some marketing from your company, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to get into the details of this. But before we do that, Brian, for the listeners who may not be familiar with Fleet Advantage, can you just give us a brief overview of your organization and the role it's playing working with fleets to help with their costs and their strategy?
Fleet Advantage is an asset management company. We have 36,000 assets on the road today. We work with 37 out of the top 100 private fleets. And we really bring a couple of key areas of expertise to help our customers manage their fleets better, right? First is data analytics. We're going to talk a lot today. As I reviewed the questions we're going to go through, a lot of them revolve around the economics of the assets. And it's amazing how many people don't know how much their existing fleet costs them. And when we talk about change that's happening in the industry, you have to compare it to some sort of constant, right? Two, we bring a team of industry professionals. So while, yes, we're in the finance space, right? Our team is made up of transportation professionals that ran fleets for large private fleets, and they've worked for 20 plus years managing the assets and all the complexity that comes with it. And then the third thing really is a team that can customize a solution for you in our office, whether it's the way you need to see documents presented, the way trucks need to be delivered, right? Any of that complexity, and we'll talk about it throughout here in the next little while, we can come up with a customized solution for you.
So, Brian, your recent industry benchmarking highlights what you call procurement paralysis. Say that 5 times fast. What are fleet leaders hesitant about right now? What's driving the paralysis?
So you really have to think back of where we've been over the last probably 6 years now. So obviously we went through COVID, and it changed our delivery and production cycles dramatically. In 2020, production dropped down to about 180,000 tractors a year, when it had traditionally been somewhere around 300,000. Then we went through a cycle of supply chain restriction, where even though there was demand for the tractors, they couldn't build them. And during that time, what happened was their existing fleet, the cost to operate went absolutely through the roof. Now that we've come out of the restrictions of COVID, the supply chain challenges, everybody wants to get back to where they traditionally ran from a cost base. So everybody's trying to cut costs, understand what they have to do to move forward. But that's challenging when you've been on the roller coaster for 5 or 6 years. And if that wasn't tough enough to get back to what your normal cost base is, we also have a regulation change coming in 2027. For several years, we had this sort of pairing of what they called the CARB regulation in the 17 states, started in California through the California Air Resource Board, and then it paired with the EPA 27 NOx reduction. Over the last 24 months, we've seen the CARB portion of it go away. The new administration took away the EPA waiver. CARB could no longer stand. So a regulation that everybody was preparing for is now gone. So that certainly put some hesitancy into the market. But then on the EPA 27, that's still coming, right? So that's a NOx reduction down to 35 milligrams, which is going to be different for everybody. So how is the industry treating that change? everybody had to redo their engine platform and make sure that they could meet the EPA 27 NOx regulations. So, everybody went about it a different way, but the end result is this. In calendar year 27, which will be model year 28 tractor, we're going to see a cost increase after all the pushes and pulls between CARB and EPA of about $12,000 to $15,000 per asset. At the same time, the industry is going through a for-hire recession in the trucking space where demand has been fairly low. So there's not demand to build new trucks, and people are coming down to this decision point where demand is still kind of low, but we have this regulation coming, and we have really about 6 or 7 more months to buy trucks this year at $12,000 to $15,000 less than they're going to cost us next year. But my demand is low, and they're really stuck in this space where they don't know what to do. Now we see the trucking recession is starting to lift, and we're seeing rates start to rise, which is giving a little bit more confidence. Over the past couple months, you've seen the number of production slots that have been filled starting to rise because I think people are getting more confidence. But leaders today are in this space where demand is still fairly low on the for-hire side, yet we have this big cost increase coming, and how are we going to navigate it?
It's just the theme of the 2020s, right? Everything is upside down. Everything is different, more challenging. It's just been a crazy time. I do agree with you. It's such a roller coaster. So everybody's going through this together. From your data, what's the key differences between the fleets that have figured out a way to remain profitable and those that have not?
Great point. For us, what we see across everybody that's been successful is understanding the economics of your current fleet. I can't always control what tariffs are going to do. I can't control the cost increase of a new truck next year, but there are some hard and fast facts that apply to every single trucking company out there when it comes to economics of their current fleet. And it really comes down into 2 buckets. For the hardware itself, you have your MPG or miles per gallon and your fuel cost. And when you're looking at your fuel cost, a truck goes through its life cycle. So you'll hear me reference this a couple times, right? It ages. And it's not just the, hey, it's 4 years old or 5 years old. It's really the performance as it ages. When a truck starts off, it's getting its optimal fuel performance. And over the next, I use 100,000 miles when I do these examples because I'm not a finance person. I'm a truck guy, right? So I'll use 100,000 miles. If you're going through and you're getting 7.5 miles per gallon in year 1, you'll get that performance right till you hit about 450,000 miles in year 4. And then you're going to start to see the fuel performance degrade. It starts to tick down a couple of tenths every year. Why? The engine's older. It just isn't as tight as it once was, and it's not getting that performance. But what's happened over those 5 years, right? With the GHG mandates to improve fuel economy, the trucks within that space that came out new every year, there's a compound annual growth rate of about 2% improvement on MPG. So by the time you get to year 4 and 5, you're now 8 to 10% behind where the industry is, and your fuel economy is degrading on your truck. So you quickly become 10% below the industry. And that doesn't sound like a lot when you're thinking about a passenger car, but running a truck at, today it's $4 and almost $5 diesel with what's going on. When you look at that, you start to realize it's tens of thousands of dollars annually that you have between new equipment and your existing fuel economy.
We're recording right now in April 2026. There is a full-blown conflict in Iran. Oil per barrel has skyrocketed just like overnight, and that's hitting us at the fuel pumps right now. So I want to ask you something. If you are in that situation and your equipment's 4 or 5 years old, you're 10% behind the market. So at like $4 a gallon, it's bad because you're 10% behind the market. But at $6 a gallon, it's how much worse is it?
Yeah, so you just got to do the math, right? But it can be as much as $5,000 to $6,000 annually negative to see that fuel increase. And the funny thing is, Jamie, fuel isn't even the toughest part. I mean, of course, fuel affects the total cost of ownership, right? But you're at that decision point. So you're going to have to buy a new piece of equipment where your capital cost is going to raise. You're looking to the fuel offset to say, but when I get that new piece of equipment, I'm going to save $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 a year, depending on where you are on that sliding scale. And then the big challenge really hits you with repair and maintenance costs. And this is the one that, people don't really look at because they happen in small increments. So let's think about that truck aging again. In year one, at 100,000 miles a year, it's about a penny and a half a mile to maintain your piece of equipment. That comes out to about $1,500 a year. By the time you get to year three, you're roughly at 5 cents a mile or $5,000 a year. By the time you get to year 5 and 6, with all the complexity that's been introduced to this equipment over the past couple of years to reduce emissions, you're somewhere between 12 and 15 cents a mile, or $12,500 to $15,000 a year to maintain that piece of equipment. And what comes along with that? More downtime, it's in the shop, increased complexity for your technicians. So when you're thinking about the economics of your truck and you're saying, I have paralysis to make this decision, like you were saying earlier, you have to understand where you are from a fuel economy standpoint, and that $8,000 to $12,000 savings we're going to see on the fuel side when you get a new piece of equipment. And then if you're in year 5 or 6 of your piece of equipment and you're paying $15,000 a year, in year one, you return back to that $1,500 maintenance costs. So you're going to save $13,500 on the maintenance side. And that's why when people get just really frozen and they say, I can't make a decision, and I ask them key elements of their current fleet, well, tell me about your fleet. Tell me how your fuel economy is going. How does it compare to where you'd be with a new piece of equipment? How does it look like from a repair and maintenance standpoint where you'd be if you return back to year one maintenance and started that cycle over again? And fleets that are confident in their decisions, understand the cost of new equipment, understand their fuel, understand their maintenance. And when you know those 3 key points, you can make a solid decision. Sure, there's the utilization of your fleet, and there's, how many trucks you can reduce if you're in a recessionary time. But really knowing those 3 key points is what takes people away from being stuck or frozen and afraid to move, and really afraid to communicate internally throughout their organization and why you'd want to make an investment when the market isn't as strong as maybe you'd like to be before you spend that capital.
Yeah, and all I can think about is when you do get to that older piece of equipment where you're doing more maintenance, then all of a sudden you've got parts choices to make. And, it's funny, we can always make things worse. So then we start adding on poor decisions, poor quality parts that don't really help with lowering total cost of operation, and we just make a bad situation worse. It's time to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Lowering total cost of operation involves looking at critical components that you put on your commercial vehicles and making sure that you are making the best selection for your application. With all of that in mind, I want to introduce you to the new standard in wheel end protection, the HubCorp's revolutionary X-Tractor. Now, what I like about this product, it's the only line of hubcaps that comes with a built-in 3-stage magnetic oil filter. And this is a safeguard for your critical wheel end components. In addition to that, it is actually a serviceable component on your vehicle now. And so it has a patent pending hex thread cartridge. And the X-Tractor makes hub oil servicing really simple and easy. And guess what? If you're not servicing that hub oil regularly, you are going to have premature failure of key components. It's just the way it works. So I highly encourage you to get on the wait list today. You can do that by heading over to thehubcorp.com. Check it out, get on the wait list, and you will get the most up-to-date information about when this product is available and also some price discounts that you won't get anywhere else. So go visit thehubcorp.com today. It's not just fleets and owner-operators that need to look at their total cost of operation and find tools that help them with their business. If you're running a repair shop, then you need tools to streamline your operations, and that's why I recommend FullBay. Now, FullBay has features like streamlined scheduling, real-time inventory tracking, technician efficiency insights, and detailed reports on exactly every aspect of the business that you need to be paying attention to make sure that your repair shop is running as efficiently as possible. And what does this mean for you? Well, it means in the end that FullBay is the very tool that's going to help you reduce downtime and make your shop more efficient. keeping the vehicles that you service on the road where they belong. Check out fullbay.com/power to maximize your shop's productivity today. That's fullbay.com/power. Manufacturers and distributors are a key component in the supply chain, and they play a vital role in keeping trucks and trailers rolling. I'd like to introduce you to Equip 360 by Gen Alpha. This platform helps manufacturers and distributors grow their part sales. But more importantly, it helps them make their customers' lives easier. And that's so important. With real-time insights into inventory, pricing, and order tracking, it's going to keep your customers coming back. Plus, it saves time by automating routine tasks and making repeat purchases simple. I encourage you to explore Equip 360 at genalpha.com, genalpha.com. Check it out today. We're back from our break. Make sure you go and check out the links in our show notes to all of our sponsors. Okay, let's get back to this episode. Brian, thank you very much for kind of setting up what is causing this paralysis in decisions. I think we have a better understanding of that. But I wanted to talk to you about a few other things that are definitely impacting our industry. So let's start with tariffs, engine changes, regulatory pressure. These things all hit at once. So how should fleets be thinking about things like risk management when there's so many variables at play?
Yeah, so you have to break them down individually, right? So we go back to what's the current economics of your fleet, and then what role does a tariff play in it, for example? So a tariff is just a cost increase passed along. What we've seen is we've settled out at somewhere around $4,000 to $5,000 for anybody that builds outside the U.S. We do have some production facilities within the U.S. where that tariff is limited, but essentially that's just a cost of goods increase. So if you take that $4,000 to $5,000 and you think about how that impacts you monthly, broken up over 48 or 60 months, you got to compare it to the current economics. So if it's going to raise the cost of operations $100 a month on the payment of your equipment, go back to what we talked about with repair and maintenance cost. We're going to remove $15,000 a year, or if you put in the year one, $13,500 worth of cost. And you got to have that baseline to compare each of these challenges to. I'd say really where we've seen people struggle is when they get frozen and then they start doing activity that they think is driving value, but it's really not. So imagine a case where a fleet director has a tariff challenge in front of them, and instead of being able to compare it versus current fleet versus new fleet, they kind of fall into that paralysis. So they start doing projects like, I can save 2% on my brake shoes, and that's going to help me drive down cost, and it's going to allow me to show the effort that I'm giving to my organization because times are tough. 2% on brake shoes may save you $50 per track per year. And when you compare it to the $13,500 in savings and the fuel savings that could be possibly achieved based on your 5-year run rate and where you've been, is that really value? I don't know. While I think that has to happen, and keeping your parts providers honest and making sure you do a proper RFP, that does provide value. But if you're avoiding the larger question around, should I replace my equipment or should I not? I think you need to solve that problem first before you work on some of those secondary items.
Yeah, and it's not like doing both isn't a good idea. It totally is. It's just when you get kind of upside down and you're focusing on things that aren't moving the needle enough and you're ignoring the big elephant in the room that needs to be addressed.
And you asked about risk management. We've also gone through quite an evolution of technology. But if you're still holding on to trucks that were 2020 and prior, and now we're in 26, there's also been great changes in safety technology. I mean, it's standard to have a full suite of safety options on every truck now. You have to literally go in and deny an option and say, you know what? I don't want lane departure anymore. I don't want collision avoidance. And from the advice I always give our customers is, think about yourself in a position where you're going through litigation and there's a document that said, I didn't want collision avoidance because I wanted to save a couple of $1,000s, or I didn't replace my equipment. I ran older equipment while I had newer equipment that was safer. And it's through its sort of grandfathered in period where people would think it's acceptable. So understanding from a safety standpoint how older equipment affects you, is also a piece of the puzzle to take into consideration.
So I'm thinking about a kind of a shift that we're seeing in the industry, which is a real move on the maintenance side from a more reactive stance. It broke, so now we have to figure out what went wrong and fix it, to a predictive, proactive maintenance approach. How does that factor into the conversations you have with fleets?
If we get there, I'm really excited. If they have the data that shows down to the VMRS code level what has been failing throughout the life of the vehicle, we can take that data and we can project where you're going to be and what's going to fail in the future. Because we talk about that escalating cost, right? We talk about it going from a penny a half in year one up to 12 to 15 cents by the time you get to year 5 and 6. When you can get down to the VMRS code level, you can go in and look and you can say, okay, what happens in year 4? Well, in year 4, we have problems that are primarily focused on our emissions and DPF systems. And those are driving 60% of the cost. So now we have a decision point. One, we can get better with the trucks we purchase going forward because we can look at how we match the warranties to the actual events that are happening to make sure we extract the optimal amount of value out of the warranty. But also, too, if you know that you're going to have a transmission challenge at 550,000 miles and you're on the fence of whether to make that decision, I was talking averages when I say in year 5 or 6, it's going to be 13 to 15,000. But when we can get down to that level and we can identify certain components that fail at a particular rate, there may be bubbles included in that raise that above $15,000. And we can start to forecast what that looks like. And fleets today are realizing the value of forecasting their failures, because it does two things. It helps you control the cost of the individual repair. It helps you project when that piece of equipment should be replaced. But the other thing it also does is it allows you to have that failure in a controlled environment. There's nothing worse than having a truck fail on the road. Now you're not only replacing the brake or the emissions component, but you're paying $1,000+ to tow it off. You're doing it at a shop where you don't have a controlled labor rate, and you're probably doubling or tripling the cost of it, right? So I think the 3 areas are projecting when you should replace, understanding how to control the repair, and then matching your warranty to the life cycle of the vehicle and those major components to make sure you're extracting the most amount of value. But great conversations when you get down to that detail.
So as we talk about this, it makes me think of how much more complicated it is than maybe the average person would assume, right? And so when it comes to financial exposure, what do you see is kind of the blind spots that a lot of fleets have? And maybe as we talk about it today, we might be able to help some people who are managing fleets to open their eyes to those blind spots.
From a financial structure perspective, you need to understand what you hope to achieve from that asset. So if you want to purchase the asset, you're going to have to control all 3 aspects of it: the procurement of the asset, the management of the asset or the use of the asset, and then the disposal of the asset. You need to be able to buy it for the right price. You need to be able to maintain it throughout its life cycle, and then you need to be able to sell it at the end. When you're talking about some sort of lease structure, there's ways that you can participate in all or none of those bases of it. So you have to say to yourself, do I want to be part of the procurement or part of the disposal, or do I just want to use the asset? Do I just want the use of the asset and allow someone else to take the risk on the front end and the back end between purchasing and selling the truck? So when you think about what that means, as a truck ages, you're kind of guessing where you think it's going to be worth after 5 years of use, and then you have to sell it. And it sounds very easy to sell a used truck. It is easy to sell a used truck that has 7 or 8 years old and 800 or 900,000 miles. But we know from the data that if you wait that long to sell it, you've essentially used an underperforming truck for several years. So you've taken a penalty there. When you look at selling a 5 to 6 year old truck that's under 500,000 miles, and you're finding a secondary user that knows there's 20 or 30% value left, it may not be the optimal value of that truck, but there's still value left in it. That's a very different type of buyer than someone buying a 1,000,000-mile truck. So once the customer can understand what portion of the space they want to play in, we can recommend the correct financial structure, right? For us, a lot of our customers operate in what you call an FMV, or a fair market value lease. This means that we take care of the procurement, we take care of the sale at the end, right? We take the residual exposure when the truck comes back because they really want to focus on the use of the asset.
Some people might listen to that and say, well, the lease option just sounds like the most obvious choice then, because then you don't have all these other things that you have to worry about. Where is there dissatisfaction with leases?
It's always in the same spot. It's as the asset gets returned at the end. So what happens is a leasing company will place a residual value on a piece of equipment, and they'll say, we're going to get your stream of payments based on 70% of the value of this truck. And when you return it, we think there's 30% value left. We're willing to take that risk that that's the right number, but you have to return it to us on a certain condition. So that means your tires have to have 50%, your brakes have to have 50%. You can't have damaged it. You have to make sure any of the body work's fixed. And, for us, we've seen that as the biggest struggle. It also drove us to innovate. So we've tried to say, hey, we know that's the biggest struggle. Let's think about it differently. Let's think about how we manage that process. Let's think about how we, explain to our customers the value of the, not having a residual value position, not having to sell a truck, and that there is truly value. You only paid for 70% of the asset. So we just have an agreed upon way to turn it in.
We've talked about a lot of different things today, Brian. If you want people to remember just one thing from today's conversation, what's that one thing?
So we started off with saying they're in paralysis. You don't have to be. You need to understand the economics of your current fleet. You need to understand the two key drivers, fuel economy and repair and maintenance. And then when it comes to picking a structure, you need to decide, do I want to have the use of the asset, or do I want to manage the entire life cycle, which includes procurement, the life cycle, and the disposal, and then play it up against the used truck market. So if you can get yourself to understand the current economics and the structure you'd like to have, you shouldn't be stuck in paralysis. You should make a decision. Costs are going up next year. It's certainly going to be, while it's going to be a challenge, let's make sure you make the right decision by asset for your company.
You've been listening to the Heavy Duty Parts Report. I'm your host, Jamie Irvin. We've been speaking with Brian, Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations at Fleet Advantage. To learn more about how Fleet Advantage can help you, visit fleetadvantage.com. Links are in the show notes. Brian, thank you so much for being on the Heavy Duty Parts Report.
Thanks for having us.
And to all of you listeners who are with us right to the end, I just wanted to say that when I think about today's conversation, for all of those people who are part of the parts industry and are supplying fleets with parts, I think sometimes it's easy to walk in every week with your flyer or whatever part you're featuring and to be very focused on what you need out of the interaction, which is to sell parts to these companies. But I hope that today's conversation opens your eyes to the complexity that fleet operators are facing and the decisions that they have to make. And so if you're trying to sell them parts and you're trying to help them with their operations, try to see the bigger picture and see how your solution can fit within that to try to help them to improve their situation. Really, at the end of the day, I know we're there to sell parts, but we're there to provide that service. So something to think about. Thanks again for listening, and as always, I want to encourage you to be heavy duty. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to subscribe to the Heavy Duty Parts Report YouTube channel, and click here to watch another great episode.